Hey Terry, hey Austin. Hey Terry, hey Austin, hey Mo. How are y'all?
Good. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Think a minute.
I see that you rock a new cut.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is the yeah, it's awesome. I love it. Love every second of it.
Yeah, it does. It look good on you.
Thank you. You know, you just can't fight genetics is all I'm gonna say.
Yeah,
My youngest comes up to me, my 2-year old, and she just says, "Daddy haircut? Daddy haircut?" Like this is just a run of the mill haircut that daddy chooses.
yeah, that's unfortunate. Because you really can't control genetics.
No, no. But the kids got is it your mom's side, mom's dad? Kid's mom's dad has good hair, so nothing ruined for me. How many weeks to graduation?
I think it's let me check.
3?
Yeah, sorry.
Awesome. Yeah, so I know next week is it's doing stuff with Max, and then what the next one after that is career with is it Laura?
Yeah.
And then the last week is just prepping for any last minute stuff on the capstone, I think. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. I checked the attendance sheet and it looks like we started the year off strong with like 19-ish folks. And what are we averaging now? Like
I
10? Yeah, I saw
and
like 9, I saw 8. So maybe we give like a couple more minutes for a few more folks and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah, I think we're only at like 8 students now. I could be wrong on that because Terry usually has his um second reporting going.
There's layers upon layers of attendance reporting here. Nice. Oh, I see. Okay. I'll be honest. This is going to be a really hard week to follow along on YouTube because there's a lot of steps that we're going to go through, um, and also I think Max already talked to you all about it, but we're taking tomorrow off for open hack, so we've got to cram. I know we can get it done, but we've got to cram all the extra stuff into the next couple of days. So, well, should we just go ahead and jump right into it?
yeah, I would say so.
All right, let's move some stuff around. Okay, so this is part 2. This is the continuation of the stuff that we were doing before, except with the bonus that since the last time that I saw all of you, you've picked up React, because I know that you had just been starting to look at JavaScript last time that I was talking to you. Um, You have the addition of React. You have the addition of Node. You have backend JavaScript programming, and you have Postgres. So that changes things up a little bit in terms of how we're going to deploy stuff. This is me. You guys know me. So what are we going to be doing over the next couple of days? Starting off, we're going to talk. We're going to do a little bit of Git housekeeping. I have been pleased to see since the last time that I saw all of you for the mini session on JavaScript testing. I've been super pleased to see a bunch of folks are continuing to use Git. So I'm assuming that this refresher is going to be pretty quick. If not, if you haven't been using Git, well, we'll figure it out together. We are going to deploy all of the things that you've written for your capstone from your Mac into the cloud. Well, we did a little bit of that last time that we met, but again, technology has kind of changed, so we need to revisit it and all the new things you've learned. And then it's pretty much just getting everything ready for graduation. The ideal state for graduation is that you go up there and you show off your capstone and you give your demo, you explain what you built and how cool it is, and that's all you have to think about. You don't have to think about bringing you don't have to think about having your MacBook set up with your development environment and what if your MacBook restarts, or all of that should be deployed. You literally go up there, you point and click on the website, and then you're done. So that's where we want to be for graduation. We don't want to have our apps just running locally on our MacBook. We want to get them out in front of our users for graduation. Make sense? Any questions? Okay. I don't know if that number is accurate. It's been way more than 15 weeks. Quick refresher on Git. What do we use Git for? It is more than just a programmer's version of, sorry. Anwar, you haven't missed much of anything. I've just been explaining what we're doing this week, and pretty straightforward. We're going to deploy all the stuff. Same thing as last time. All right, so a quick refresher on Git. Well, let me stop. I don't want to preach to the choir here. Who has continued to use Git since the last time that I saw you? Just by show of hands or reactions. A couple people shaking their heads. You got to fess up now. I'm going to find out. You got to fess up now. Couple hands. Okay, so it looks like the class is 50-50. That's better than the 4 to 5 other cohorts that I've been a part of. So we're making progress here. You will use Git every single day as a software developer. It behooves you to use it as much as possible during this cohort and ask questions about it. You can always reach out to me. You can reach out to Max. You can reach out to Ryan, any of the other instructors to get help with Git. But it's a tool that you're going to use. It's just like it's as ubiquitous as your code editor. So all that to say, Git is more than just a fancy way of backing up our files, although it does a really good job of backing up our files. It does more than that. It allows us to see what changes. It allows us to propose changes through things like merge requests. We talked about merge requests at a really high level the last time that we met. But Git really is an invaluable tool, and it's something that you're going to need to know in your professional career. Git is the program, but there's websites like GitHub that we use and we interact with using the Git CLI. We actually use a program called GitHub Desktop. It combines the Git tool with a nice visual interface, and then obviously talks to GitHub. So I'm going to share these slides. If you would like to follow along and not look at my screen, Also, there's a bunch of references here in these slides for how to do various things like creating repos. And last time we talked about Git, we talked about all these different situations that you could get yourself into using Git, and ways to fix those situations. So please use these slides as a reference if you need them. Alternatively, just ask. And then some of the terminology from back in week 6. Yeah, I mean, there's so many puns with Git, it's hard not to. I didn't even notice when I said it. Okay, so for tonight, we're gonna do a couple of things. Some of you in class, some of you might already have your Git repo set up for your capstone. If you do, great, you're already one step ahead. If you don't have GitHub repo set up for your capstone, I'm gonna show you how to make those. One of the things that we're gonna do is we're gonna create 2 repos for our capstone, and we're gonna do this. Nice. We're going to do this very intentionally. We're going to create a repo for the front end code, the JavaScript, and we're going to create a front end repo for the React. And then we're going to create a back end repo for the Node code. And the reason why we do that is because if we were to jam both sets of code together into the same repository, there's some complications in terms of automation later on that we're going to look at. So all that to say, we're going to end up making 2 repos for the code for our capstone. If you already have a capstone repo created, feel free to use it. But there is a requirement that we separate them out into 2 repositories. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, then my next question, does anybody already have a repo for their capstone? Okay, I've got a couple
Didn't
people.
we already create them already? That a few weeks ago.
You might have the portfolio repos, but and maybe you have a capstone repo. I don't know. Maybe we've already created them. If we did create them as a class, though, we would have only created one of them. We wouldn't have had them split out. Okay, great, Joe. All right. Well, if you've already got them, great. If you don't have them, follow along with me. We're going to create these 2. If you're not sure, feel free to just make another set because we're going to copy over code into these new repos. Copy over your capstone code into these repos. So if you don't have these set up, feel free to follow along, and we'll get all these things created. Go ahead, Terry.
So from what you're saying is we need to like create like 2 separate like repos for the front end and the back end, because I have mine literally like both of them in one like folder, and it's already updated. It's already like up there on my GitHub. So
nice. Yeah, I'm going to ask you to split it out in this class, and the reasoning will become clearer closer to the end of class. I'm going to show you some cool stuff you could do when you have them split. You can do all of this in one giant repo. You can have all of your code in one thing. It's just going to make some of the stuff that we want to do later a little more difficult. So if you can, please split it out into 2 with me. And okay, other questions, thoughts? Excellent. All right. Next up, I had this in here because in previous cohorts, I had students that hadn't even started on their capstone yet. Has anybody in here not started on capstone? As in, don't have any files, don't have any code? Everybody's got code? Everybody's got some capstone code? Cool. Awesome. Awesome. Great. If you don't and you're not speaking up, that's okay. There is code here, which I'm going to use because I didn't write a capstone. So I'm going to steal the blog example that y'all have been using to work on Postgres and Node.js. So I'm going to steal those files and use that to seed my to seed my repos. If you don't have Capstone files, that's a bigger problem. But if you'd like to just get through class tonight, here's a link to some code. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's jump right into it. Let's create a couple repos. I'm going to call mine Capstone Backend and Capstone Frontend. That just keeps things really simple. You can call your stuff whatever. The only requirement here is, again, we need to have two repos, and we're going to separate what goes into them based on front end and back end technologies. All right. Let's dust off our Git client. So GitHub Desktop. And set that to the side. One of the easiest ways to go and create repos is through the GitHub website. So I'm going to go to github.com, click that plus button up in the top, and create some repositories. Be sure when you create these repositories to set the repository to public and add a README file. It's two things we have to do every time. So Onward, to answer your question, is it true that cloning, pulling, and pushing will take longer if you jam all the code into a single repo? Not necessarily, because remember, when we commit and push things, we're committing and pushing the changes that we made to that repo. So let's say that we have, and I'm going to throw some more terminology at you. The concept of shoving all of the code into one repo is called a mono repo, meaning that you have a single repo with a bunch of stuff in it. For example, I work at Datadog. Datadog has several mono repos, and what that means is that everybody at Datadog, the 3,000, 4,000 something software engineers, everybody pushes code to the same repository, which makes it a mono repo. Now, does that make it slower when you're pushing and committing and making changes? Not necessarily, because again, people are only committing the small slices of code that they change. So there's not really a performance impact to having a mono repo, as opposed to having a bunch of individual repos for code. But the cloning does take a while, right? Because cloning is pulling down the entirety of a repo. And so if it is a massive mono repo with a lot of stuff in it, then it's going to take longer to get that initial clone to make that initial copy on your machine. So yes and no, kind of to answer your question. There are performance trade-offs there. And I'm not sure what you mean by extra configuration. Yeah, so that's going to be one of the things that we talk about is the automation that we're going to use. The automation that we are going to use to automate some of the things that I'm talking about tonight does use different build tools, but you could still accomplish this all in the same repo. I mean, if you create a repo, two folders in it, front end and back end, inside of both of those folders, you can have package.jsons, you can have whatever build tooling you'd like, and they can live independently in each of those folders. No problem. But if you want to have some of the automation I'm going to show later, it gets kind of tricky. Okay, I'm gonna finish creating my backend repo. Once you've got these two repos created, go ahead and let's start filling in the deploy sheet for this week. Here's the link to it. Everybody should have an invite and be able to get into this. If you aren't able to get into this spreadsheet, let me know and I'll make sure that that you get an invite. So we should be able to fill out two of the links here, the GitHub backend link and the GitHub front end link. And if you know your domain name for your capstone, feel free to throw that in there too. All right, there's 11 people in the Zoom. I must have missed invites for some folks. Okay, pick on a couple people. Austin. Okay, we got front end. Oh, sorry, didn't see that. Mo, were you able to create the two repos?
In the process of doing that now. Sorry, my kids are loud.
No worries. Anwar.
Yes, I'm actually away from my laptop. I'm using a library's computer, so I don't have any of my code on here. I'm just in the process of I just installed Visual Studio Codes on this computer, and I'm just gonna take the blog post code and throw it into there.
Okay. Are you able to create those two repos in GitHub?
Yeah. I
Okay.
actually had to download GitHub Desktop in like the past 5 minutes, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Give it a couple more minutes and then we'll jump to adding some code. Cool. Okay. Well, I'm gonna keep going. If you haven't created your GitHub repos, try to make those, and then we'll move on to the next thing. If you're having any problems creating those repos, just let me know. Okay. Let's jump to the next step here. All right, so we've got those repos created on github.com. Let's go ahead and start cloning down these empty repositories to our machine. So we'll go into open up GitHub desktop. We'll clone a repository from the internet. And let's clone both of them down. So I'm going to clone my backend first, then clone the front end. If you do this right over on the left, you should be able to pick and select between those two repositories. So we created them on GitHub. Now we're cloning them down on our machine, so we have access to them locally. All right. Give another minute or two for folks to get this cloned down. Any questions so far? Kind of basic Git setup. Once you have them cloned down, let's go ahead and populate them with some files. I'm gonna pick the front end, and then after we fill in the front end, we'll go and jump to the back end. So let's fill in the front end repo. I'm gonna click show in Finder. It's gonna give me a folder with my GitHub repo here. So I need to hydrate this with some files for my capstone. So I don't know how people have been working on the capstone before, if you haven't been doing it inside of a GitHub repo, but what we want to do is we want to take the React that you have written for your capstone thus far and shove it into this folder. And then from here on out, from now to graduation, we're going to make all of our changes and develop using this folder, using this repo. But for me, I'm going to go steal from the blog. So I'm going to go steal the blog front end code, throw it in here. And then when I come back, a bunch of stuff is showing up in GitHub desktop because I added all these files to this repo. Commit and push. Does anybody know of the special name of the file that we use to ignore things that we don't want to track in Git? Anybody remember the name of that file?
Get ignore.
Git ignore. Yep. What have we used git ignore for? There's one culprit here that is going to rear its ugly head here in a second.
Node.
Node modules. Yep. So we're creating a new Git repository. Git repositories by default don't come with a .git ignore. So it would probably be in our best interest to go ahead and add one as we're doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the VS Code really quick while I'm here.
How bogged down does it get if you commit and push node?
It gets pretty bad. I mean, well, I can show you how bad it gets. So I'm here inside of my Capstone. I'm here inside of my Capstone front end. I'm going to do npm install. Cool. And if we just look at node modules, disk usage, sorry. Do you max depth? What is, sorry, do you? Oh, -d. Okay. If we look -d one. There we go. If we look at the size of node modules, we can see that node modules, the folder is just 351 megs, which really isn't that much. It is what Git gets hung up on is the sheer amount of files. So this command just walks node modules and counts up the number of individual files inside node modules. That's 42,000 files that Git starts to track as soon as you commit node modules. So again, it's not a wow, this is a really big file kind of problem. It's yeah, that's with all of the children folders inside of node modules. If you use the find command, it just walks all of the files inside of that folder. And then if you pipe that into the word count, sorry, I believe it's word count. I don't remember what WC stands for. But if you pipe that into WC-L, it counts the total number of lines that pop out of a command. But yeah, there's 42,000 files inside node modules. And so that's what Git gets bogged down in, is it has to take a snapshot and track 42,000 different things. So yeah, let's write a git ignore and not commit 42,000 files to GitHub. So quick reminder on writing git ignores, just called git ignore, and then you list the things you want Git to ignore. We can just say node modules. That's enough to tell Git to ignore that folder. It's kind of nice though to put a slash at the end, because that just lets the reader know that node modules is a folder. Okay, and then I'm going to commit and push that. So now from this point forward, I won't accidentally make an edit and add my node modules. Okay, that's the front end. Anybody having any problems committing and pushing code to their front end repo? And I pick on a couple of people. First, I'm going to pick on myself. Do I have? It looks like I have files here, so I'm looking pretty good. Pick on Joe next. Joe's got some stuff. Mo is still working on some stuff, but Mo's got some loud kids. Austin's got some files. Cool. Hooray. How are you doing on uploading files? Tiffany. So in the get ignore, just throw node modules in there. The folder node modules that just tells Git to ignore that directory completely. Don't worry, my repo's loaded into the wrong folder and I missed all the rest of it. So when you say loaded into the wrong folder, were you able to clone down the capstone front end onto your machine? Oh, no worries. So we went on a little side excursion talking about node modules. The important thing is that we copy all of the capstone. Yeah, and we're going to do this again for the back end, but the important thing is that you just copy your files in that you have currently for your capstone front end into here. Tiffany, the one thing I'm going to recommend is that you take your files and bring them up a level. So inside of your capstone front end repo, you have a front end folder. So what we want to do is take the front end folder and bring it up a level so that package.json, your git ignore, source, and public are sitting at the root. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, Terry looks good. All right, yeah, let's rinse and repeat on the back end. I'm gonna open up my backend folder. And I'm going to take my backend code and throw it into here. And while I'm here, I'm also going to create another git ignore so I don't accidentally track any node modules. Commit and push. All right, now at this point, we should have 2 GitHub repos seeded with all of our capstone code up to this point. And from now to graduation, these folders, these repos that we just copied our code into are going to become the folders that we do our capstone work on. Let's see. Safi. It looks like there's an issue when we were creating the backend repository. I think that my guess is that when you went and created a new repository, my guess is that you forgot to check the add a README file box, and that's why it's showing up as completely empty. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think probably the easiest way to do this one is to just go to on your repository to go to settings and then just delete it and recreate it. The reason why is because if you don't create a README when you're initializing the repo, on this page, it'll have like a bunch of steps saying like use the git command and type a bunch of things to a terminal. It's kind of complicated and hard to do without messing up. So easiest thing to do is just delete it and recreate it. And let us know if you need some help, because the next couple of steps, if you haven't created at least the backend repo, the next couple of steps are not going to work. So we could probably take a break to make sure that everybody's caught up on this step, because it's kind of important for the next couple of things. Tiffany, nice. Very nice. Andy fixed the front end. Very nice, Tiffany. Very, very nice. Cool. So I think for backend, it's Doveray, Sophie. I think we're just looking for those two repos. Sounds good. And Mo. All right, so let's do that then. Let's have a quick break. It's 6:13 now, so let's be back at can somebody crunch the math for me? What's 25 minutes from now? 6:40? Is that accurate? 6:40. Yeah, nice. Thank you, Joe. Back at 6:40. Mo and Safi and Doveray. Let me know if that's not enough time to get those front end and back end repos created. Or if you need help, I'll be here. All right, see you back at 6:40. Okay, let's jump back into it. I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay. Just get caught up here. Checking in, make sure we've got some backend code so we can keep on moving. Get some backend code, nice. Safi, were you able to add some code to the backend? Do you have a second to share your screen and show me where you're at? We just got started, Austin.
Mainly because I don't have access to a computer.
Sorry, I can't hear you. It kind of broke up a little bit.
I had said mainly because I don't have access to my laptop at the moment, so I was just able to make the repositories, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's see what else. Anwar, I know you had the same thing. You don't have access to your laptop right now. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm on a computer right now.
Okay. All right. Well, The slides are here, so if you, and we'll have the video up too, so I guess we'll go with that. All right. Let's jump into deploying the backend. Okay. We already went through this. I don't think anybody has any questions about how to do the Git stuff. Let's move on to the actual deploy part. Okay. Last time that we talked, I had a slide that looked a lot like this. Why are we talking about deploys again? Well, we just can't use the same stuff. Theoretically, we could make the front end work, right? We could make the front end work using GitHub Pages, because the front end is file hosting. Here's some static assets that compile down to a set of HTML and JavaScript and CSS, things that the browser can render natively. So technically, we don't have to change much up for the front end if we don't want to. But and so what we did the last time we met, week 6, week 7, technically could work for the front end. For the back end, we can't do simple file hosting anymore. Because what do we do with Postgres and what do we do with the Node.js, right? From just a logical standpoint, what would it look like if we use the same pattern for front-end file hosting with Postgres and Node.js? Do we ask all of our customers? So let's say we have a website. Let's say our website sells T-shirts or something. Do we ask our customers to run Postgres on their phones when they visit our website? Do we ask our customers to run Node.js? I mean, I'm being silly, right? But we simply can't distribute our Node.js and our Postgres databases to all customers. We keep it in one spot. So because of that, the way that we deploy has to change from what we talked about in week 6 and week 7. All right. There's a bunch of people that will take your money, just like when we talked about in week 6. There's a bunch of people that will take your money and do file hosting for you. Here's just a couple of them. I'm going to talk, so a little historical stuff here. I've taught all sorts of stuff in careers in code. I taught students at one time, I taught students how to do deploys using Heroku, and then Heroku went from being free to paid, so it started to cost money. I taught students at one point in time, I taught them how to do deploys using just Amazon Web Services, which was pretty complicated. And then lately, I've been teaching students how to do deploys using Fly, and Fly has been a great deploy provider. There's a lot of different services, though, that you can use, and here's just a couple of them. If we look at the way that we deploy our code, there's this notion of static and dynamic content, like static being the React code, dynamic being, take for example, the blog backend. It's dynamic in the sense that it returns different lists of blog posts based on which kind of endpoint that you're hitting. This is just stuff that you can't serve dynamic content through static file hosting. So that introduces a need for this tier of hosts that we're going to look at, which is effectively application hosting, and we're going to be doing it with Fly. A little bit of background on Fly: their application hosts. They will do what we're calling application hosting, which is here's some code, run it. So they will do this application hosting that we're going to go through today. They'll also do bare metal VMs, which means spin up a box and give me some credentials to log into it, just like I would any other computers, like I do my Mac and Windows machines and whatnot. So they'll do everything from application hosting all the way up to virtual machines. They have a free tier, which is really nice for experimenting with stuff like what we're doing today. But they also have a pay-as-you-go model. So if you decide, like, I need to be able to serve 10,000 users per minute. Well, you could type in a command and Fly will scale up to whatever you need. So they're a Series B, and I say that they run their own hardware. I think that they are actually running AWS behind the scenes. I don't think that they have their own data centers anymore. I believe that this has changed since the last time that that I wrote these slides. But either way, it's pretty impressive. They manage at least their own virtual machines, and then they build this nice abstraction layer on top of it that we're going to look at today. And so we're going to use it for the Capstone backend, and we're going to use it for hosting our Postgres database. Questions so far? Okay. Well, let's get started with the pointing and the clicking. Here's the link to Fly. We're going to go and sign up and create an account here. Here's the link. Yeah, Joe. It is. I don't want to say that. I don't want to lie to you. Data centers. Let's see really quick. Oh, yeah. I lied. It is not a reskinned AWS. They use OVH Cloud, which OVH Cloud, I believe, is a set of data centers. French cloud computing. I think that they actually have data centers they have computers on racks in data centers that they manage. I don't think that, although this looks like it's just a rental for dedicated servers. Heroic and Dream Cloud. I'm not familiar with either of those. My data center knowledge is pretty limited. I don't. Heroku though is definitely a reskin of AWS services, but I believe Fly manages some of their own servers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people do reskins of AWS, and for good reason. Like AWS is extremely complicated. When I taught previous cohorts how to use AWS to host their capstones, I mean, it was just a lot of stuff to learn. It's nice for folks that need the customizability of AWS, but if you don't need all the features and the bells and whistles, it's a lot of stuff to have to navigate. So all that to say, go in, sign up with GitHub. I find that signing up with GitHub is kind of the easiest way to do this, but go in here, sign up with GitHub, and we'll get started. While you're excuse me, while you're doing this, I'm gonna go and destroy some stuff. So that I can walk through this example with y'all. If anybody wants to schedule a one-on-one with me, you're welcome to. Please just reach out to me in Slack. My Calendly doesn't work. I have to pay in order to get it to integrate with my work calendar, and that's all that matters. So I don't use Calendly. Just send me a link send me a message on Slack, and I'll be happy to book a time and that works for both of us. Okay. So once you're in Fly, you should see a screen that kind of looks similar to this. So some sort of dashboard that allows you to create some stuff. I'm going to point out a couple things here. The first one is that there is a number of plans that you can use with Fly. The plan that we're going to use is the hobby plan, which I guess is now deprecated and I'm grandfathered into. Either way, the pay-as-you-go, the hobby plan, whatever the base tier plan is, pick that and we'll use that. We shouldn't have any costs this month. For example, like last month, I used $1.46 worth of resources on Fly. Anything under $5 in Fly just says it's free. So yeah, in total, I used about $1.46, and I got credited back some discounts, which made it 83 cents. Anyways, I didn't have to pay for it. All right, let's install the Fly CLI. Here is the command to run. And to install this, just take what I pasted into the Zoom chat, open up your favorite terminal, paste that in, and run it. So at this point, we should have our Fly account created using our GitHub credentials, and we should be installing the Fly program on our Macs. Once you've got Fly installed, you could test that it's working by typing out Fly. You can call the Fly program using either Fly or flyctl. I like Fly just because it's slightly shorter. One thing that we should all do is a Fly version update, and that just ensures that we're running the latest version. If you are able to run Fly version update and get something like 02.126, then you're on the same version as me, which is great. And then we need to just tie the Fly program that we just installed with the Fly dashboard that we just created an account for. And to do that, you just say, Austin, did you run the curl command? You did. Okay. Try opening up a new terminal and then type in Fly. Are you getting anything now?
I might have because it might be because I put in it looks like I put in a day 4 folder somewhere. So would that mess it up at all or
Nope, you can run the command anywhere and it should install it
okay.
regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, I'm having that same problem.
Okay, what I want everybody to do is I want you to open up sorry, I've got a command for you that we're gonna all run together. We're gonna run bear with me for a moment. Let's do this. So what I want everybody to do is I want everybody to type in this command and open up their ZSHRC file. We're going to add some stuff to the end of it. So at the end of your ZSHRC file, you should have these two lines here, except my lines are going to be different from yours. And when you ran that curl, it should have printed out something that said something like, add these two lines to your file. Is anybody able to see that after they ran their curl? It'll look something like this. It'll say like manually add the directory to your home ZSHRC or similar. And then I'll have two export statements there. Does anybody see that?
I'm getting does not exist.
Joe, you're not using ZSHRC. Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting the same
Ju-
thing.
Is it bash?
Do you have a bash RC?
It's saying ZSH up at the top, but
Joe, do you mind sharing your screen really quick and just show me?
yeah.
Yeah, you're in Z shell. Open. Yeah, I don't think that you have a .zshrc, which isn't a problem. We'll just make one. So just open. It says it does not exist. Pop quiz. Who remembers how to create a file in the terminal?
Isn't it like make directory or nano something?
Close. mkdir is the command for creating a directory. Does
Mhm.
anybody remember the command for creating just a single empty file? Starts with a T.
Oh, touch.
Touch.
Okay.
So create touch and then tilde slash. I'm sorry, just the word touch.
Oh.
Touch is the command we're using. Touchy, touch, and then tilde / .zshrc with a space in between the touch and the and then space tilde / .zshrc. So if you don't have a ZSHRC file, create one doing the steps that, and then run that open again. There should be a file there. Excellent. Now go back to that curl that you had when you installed, and where it says manually add, and then it has export fly CTL. Yep, grab those 2 lines, throw them into your ZSHRC, fix that indentation. Excellent. Save. And then open up a new terminal. And then type fly. Perfect. You have the fly program. So just to recap for other folks, the commands that we just ran, if you get ZSHRC does not exist, do that to create the file. That to open it. And then paste those 2 lines in. I'm going to, over on the capstone links spreadsheet, I'm going to add a new column called fly is installed and working. I'm going to create a new column here. Please come in here and attest to whether or not you're able to get fly installed and working. And then I'll use that as a way of knowing who needs help. As far as the working part, we'll figure that out, but installed, let's just make sure that we're all on the same page.
So we opened the ZSHRC file. Now, what's after that?
Yeah, so inside of the ZSHRC file, you want to add 2 lines. So they're going to look something like this. And you can get these 2 lines, this export fly CTL install, export path. You could get these 2 lines by looking at the terminal where you installed fly. It should have printed out these 2 lines. If you can't find those 2 lines, just steal and paste these into your ZSHRC. I'll paste mine. The important thing though is that you change where mine says Nevins, because that's my username. Replace that with your Mac username, and you can find out what your Mac username is by typing "who am I" in a terminal, and it'll tell you. If it's saying that you aren't logged in, the next command that we're going to run is fly auth login. These are on the slides if you want to steal from the slides. Otherwise, here it is in Zoom chat. Once you do the auth login, it will connect your CLI with your account on. With your account on Fly. Anwar, laptop issues though, right? We've got like roughly half of the class with Fly installed. Who else? Does anybody need help getting their Fly binary to run?
Hi, oh, so sorry, go ahead. Right. Anyway, so I got a message from Ozma. She's telling me that she's having some issues with Wi-Fi connection and she just needed some more clarification on the command lines of what you would be putting in.
Yeah, some clarification on what to type in. So if you don't have a ZSHRC file, you'll want to run touch. You want to run this command to create it. That's the first thing that you'll want to do. The next thing is you'll want to open up the file. And then the last thing you want to do is add 2 lines into it. And I'll show you what those lines look like. They look something like this. And in fact, I think we could probably just hack on this to make it generic enough for everybody to use. I'm pretty sure, and I'll just test it on my machine real quick. Yeah, it works. Pretty sure you could just copy paste this into your ZSHRC. So here's the instructions. Install Fly, create a ZSHRC file if you don't already have one, open it up, and then we're going to paste these 2 lines into the ZSHRC. And we can probably get even closer if we just do stuff that's on my machine really quick. Oh, yeah, that works. Okay, let me update those instructions really quick. It's really just if you haven't done any of this, you can also just run these two things, and that should be the functional equivalent of the previous steps. Anybody else having problems? Terry, were you able to get Fly installed? No? Do you mind sharing your screen? Show me where you're at. Cool.
Yeah, I'll like start with this part right here.
So save. Cool. Open up a new terminal. Fly off login.
Stop.
Fly space off AUTH, like authentication AUTH space login. Command off and fly. What is going on there? Go back to the terminal where you've got. Oh, I see what's wrong. Go to that. Yeah, exactly. Click there. Go up two. Press two up twice. Add an extra H there. So we're taking the install script and we're piping it into the SH command. So throw an H after the S. There you go, right there. H. Enter. Cool. Now we'll actually install the fly program, and then back in the other terminal. Yeah, just try doing fly again. Yeah. Excellent. Yep. Continue. Nice. Now you're logged into to fly. You're all set up.
Thanks.
Yep. No worries. Anybody else? Joe, I know were you able to get yours going? Cool. And Mo. I don't think Mo's in here. Nope. Okay. I think it's just we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folks that were able to get Fly CLI working. Yeah, definitely reach out because we need to be able to deploy the backend for our capstone. I really don't want to lose people if they're not able to get this installed, because the next 30 minutes isn't going to make a whole lot of sense if you're not able to follow along using Fly. So please reach out, speak up right now if there's anything that I can do to help you get set up. Otherwise, we're going to keep moving.
I like how your camera like literally like following you.
Yeah, come back. Okay. So deploying the capstone backend is pretty straightforward with Fly. What we're going to do is launch a terminal in our backend code. The easiest way to do that is here. I've got capstone backend selected. I'm going to click open in VS Code to get VS Code terminal here. Close out of this one because I don't need it. So make sure that you open up the capstone backend. Make sure that you open your backend code up in VS Code. And we're talking about the code that we cloned down and then hydrated, copied files into. Make sure you're in the right spot. From there, let's go ahead and get a terminal. So I'm going to click over here and get open in integrated terminal. get access to a terminal in your backend code. So I'm assuming that the folks that have Fly installed have done Fly off login. So your terminal is now connected with Fly. If it's not, feel free to run it. You only need to do this once. You don't need to do this each time that you open up a new terminal. You just need to do it once on your machine. So after we do our Fly off login, the next thing we're going to do is a Fly launch. And I'm going to point out a couple things here. The first thing is that Fly has this integration that detects what language, what tools, what software you're writing in. So notice here that it detected that we're deploying a Node.js app. This is really important because if Fly isn't able to detect what you're writing, then you have to fill out a bunch of stuff. But because Fly is kind of smart, it knows what you've written and it's going to set a bunch of defaults for us. If it doesn't say detected a Node.js app, let me know because something's wrong, and it's probably going to be asking you a bunch of different things. Okay, a couple other things I want to point out. It might be spitting up a region that's not in your area. Can somebody tell me what region that they're getting? I'm getting Seattle under mine. Is anybody getting?
Chicago.
Okay, so it's geolocating somewhere close to you. Cool. So that's the actual data center that they're going to spin up your backend in. Okay, cool. Other people are getting Virginia. So it looks like you guys are over on the east. Nice. Oh, nice. Some people are getting really close geographically. Cool. The other thing I want to point out is the instance type. So shared CPU 1x just means that you're on a machine with a bunch of other people. This is kind of, go ahead, Tiffany.
Actually, I cannot find my Fly in my terminal.
Oh, please share your screen. Let's fix it real quick.
I can share my
I don't-
screen now.
啊，他这怎么传到我的啊？哎，不是传到我的，是怎么打到我的？
I read sign in here, but still cannot see anything here.
Dash. What is it? Dash.
Jimmy, I need to.
Is Dash a different terminal?
I don't think so. I use this one.
Okay. Yeah, let's try a different terminal and just see.
Which one you want me to?
Yeah, let's use CSH. Yeah. Cool. And now if you do a Fly launch. Yep, launch. Fly launch. So launch is LAUNCH. LAUNCH.
Oh, thanks.
Perfect. You're on the same screen as me. Anybody else?
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So yeah, I wanted to point out shared CPU 1x just means that you're getting one core from a CPU. It's shared with others, which means that other people running on the same CPU as you are going to basically fight over that one core. But the benefit is that a lot of things can run on that machine, which makes it very, very cheap. So if we need more processing power, we can always bump this up, and I'll talk about that later. And then we get 1 gigabyte of RAM, which isn't a whole lot, but should be adequate enough for what we need today. And then also we're going to get a Postgres instance. note that this is also similarly spec'd to the app machine. So the app machine is what's going to run our Node.js code. The Postgres box is what's going to store our database. It's really important to point out now that up until this moment, you've been doing all your development on your Mac, right? We've been running Node.js, NodeMon, Postgres, all of that on our machine. We're about to switch to running all of this in the cloud, so it's no longer going to be on your Mac. It's important to point out that you're going to get a brand new Postgres database, which means that all of the data that you have currently for your capstone that you've been testing with and have been working on, all of that data in your Postgres instance on your Mac is not going to be there in Fly. And we'll talk about that here today. We'll talk a little bit about how we get that data into your Postgres, but just keep in mind that we're going to be introducing a brand new database. Okay, go ahead and hit yes, and it will start spinning up all of these resources. Oh, sorry, don't hit yes. I meant to say no. It looks like it's gonna bring up a box. This is kind of cool though. Either way, just hit confirm. We don't have any settings that we want to tweak. Now there's something really, really important that's going to spit out on the screen. And if we don't save it into our notes, if we don't save it into like a secret manager, passwords, Mac notes, whatever you use to take notes and keep track of important things, if we don't save that, we're not going to be able to log into our database. And I'll point it out when it shows up here in a second. Okay, here's the really, really important thing. And this will pop up in your terminal here in a second if it hasn't already. There's a connection string. Grab this and put it somewhere safe. I'm gonna put mine in a note and save it on my desktop. The little warning message here that says save your credentials in a secure place, you won't be able to see them again, is completely true. Do not lose this string. We will need it later. Also, just gonna set a quick reminder to myself later to revoke my connection string so that people watching this on YouTube don't come in and try to mess with their database. Okay. Bunch of stuff happening down here, bunch of things getting created. Is everybody able to run through this successfully? Get a Postgres instance, and does it say something along the lines of visit your newly deployed app at blah, 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 blah? Is everybody able to get that? All right. If you're able to get this far, that link right there, I want you to grab it and throw it on the spreadsheet. That is going to be your backend link. Cool. We got some backend links. While people are still getting those links going, feel free to visit your link, and try to load it in the browser. I will say that I am using the blog capstone code, which does not work out of the box, and we'll talk a little bit about how to get this deploy up and running. I want to point out a couple things that Fly does that that it's helpful to take a look at and know how to do. The first command for working on your deployed backend that I want everybody to try out is just fly logs. If you type this into the terminal, it should, here in a minute, should start printing out the logs from your application. Another one is fly status, which shows the number of instances that are running. By default, when you deploy to Fly, it's going to spin up 2 machines. It spins up 2 machines to serve as much traffic as possible. So in the case of one of the machines failing over, it will reroute traffic to the other instance. So that's why we see 2 machines here. Let's try fly logs again. There we go. Okay, so I've got a bunch of stuff showing up on my screen. Is anybody able to run fly logs on their machine?
I got instance refused.
Instance refused, like these kind of econ refused.
No, I'm getting. Here, I can just copy it. It might be easier than me trying to explain.
And yes, 1 gig to work within the PG instance, which means that if you're
Oh, yes, I do have that. And then it was trying to proxy. Just sent like a bunch of different requests at the bottom.
okay. I'm guessing that it's some variation of the error that I'm running into on my screen. If it does SQL, if your capstone does SQLize things, you're very, very likely hitting the same issue that I am, and we'll talk about it here in a sec. But just to follow up on that, Joe, we have 1 gig of RAM for our Postgres instance, which means that if any of our queries to the database consumes more than 1 gig of RAM, it's going to fail. This is something to keep in mind. If your capstone revolves around really large queries or storing images in the database, then just be aware that you might run out of memory there. Same thing if your capstone is related to accepting files. Like, let's say, for example, our capstone was something that edited movies or did something to movie files. If you were to upload a 5 gig movie to your capstone and then do some kind of transformation on it, of course, that 5 gigs would blow the 1 gig that you get from Fly. So just keep in mind that, yeah, you're working inside of a 1 gig memory constrained environment. All right. So looking at my screen, assuming that you're at what the typical buffer companies pay for to ensure the DB or backend doesn't fail. Oh, that's a big question, right? Like, let's take Datadog, for example, that's ingesting metrics and logs on the order of gigabytes per second. How much compute do we keep in buffer? I couldn't even begin to tell you. I mean, it's on the orders of hundreds of machines that are kept around in terms of, like, for example, developers work pretty standard hours. So the 9 to 5 curve that Datadog needs to be prepared for, that needs to be ramped up for in order to accept a bunch of traffic from developers as they're logging into Datadog in the morning, that curve is pretty easily measurable, and there can be a certain amount of compute and buffer ready for those peak hours. So it all just kind of depends. Like if you're working at TikTok, then when something goes viral or when people are visiting TikTok can kind of vary. Maybe there is certain hours that most people are browsing on their phone, but that kind of buffer that you need to run the really big applications, I mean, it can be pretty incredible how much money and how much compute resources are being held in buffer, which is why it's really not practical. Like, for example, let's look at our app here. If we do a fly status, I pointed out a second ago that we have 2 instances running here, right? One of the things that we can do with fly, and I have this on one of the other slides here. One of the things that we can do is we can scale up using scale count. So I can do something like fly scale count 100. Cool. Now I'm going to spin up 98 machines to run the blog backend. So do I need to have 100 machines in order to serve this demo for tonight's class? No. I mean, what am I going to use 100 computers for? I certainly don't have the need to serve that much traffic, and I'm going to have roughly 99 computers sitting around doing nothing for the rest of class, right? So it's kind of a waste of resources. So keeping a buffer around of machines like I'm doing right now, keeping a buffer of machines around for our capstone is super expensive and kind of cost prohibitive. The cheaper alternative here is what's called auto scaling, whereas the number of customers visiting our capstone increases, so does the number of computers that we provision. And you can set this up automatically with Fly, as opposed to what I'm doing right now, which is I'm manually creating 100 computers to serve my capstone. And we can talk a little bit more about auto scaling later on, but I'm going to actually go ahead and stop here because I don't want all these machines. And I'm going to scale back down to 2. So we'll just go ahead and destroy all those machines. Yeah, so I spun up, I started to spin up about 100 instances, and each one of these computers had a copy of the blog backend, so it was ready to serve. It's ready to serve a lot of traffic. Okay, and we're back down to 2. Nice. So if you think you need more compute, and we'll talk about that here in a second, if you think you need a little bit more compute, you can use fly scale count, and that will just spin up machines. But all of this is no good if our app isn't actually able to run. So right now, if we do fly logs and we look at our backend, we can see that it's just sitting there and restarting. It's just continually rebooting. The error logs, if the error logs aren't available here, you can go back and look at the same error logs using the Fly UI. So I'm going to click on my Fly app here and go to logs. So it looks like they've redone the logs. Actually going to go to live logs instead. And it doesn't look like I have that helpful error log anymore because I've sat here and it's rebooted and I've lost those error messages from earlier when it started up. If I want to get those error messages back, all I have to do is kick off another deploy. When we created our Fly application, we did Fly launch, right? And that's what initialized the first couple sets of machines. From here on out, though, we've already got the machines created. So from here on out, we don't need to do Fly launch anymore. We just say fly deploy, and that will kick off another build. Feel free to give fly deploy a run on your machine to see what I'm talking about. If you scale to 0, just scale back to 1 or scale to 2. I mean, that should be enough to get a machine going. There it is. So I had this open, but I'm gonna just use what's in the terminal. So I'm gonna do fly logs again, and let's take a look at what's going on with our deploy. I think the reason why it's not printing anything out is because these are live logs. We'll just use these logs here to start debugging. Okay. So there's a couple errors here that I see. Let's start with the first one here. All right. Anybody want to venture a guess as to what they think? And I'll try to give full context here. Does anybody want to venture a guess as to what they think this error message is trying to tell us?
It's not connecting to the client.
Can you expand on what the client means?
The end user.
So our backend reaching out to customers?
Well, I guess technically the other way around, right? But wouldn't be able to serve something. Looks like it's not running on. I would say the right port. What's the difference between port and socket? Are those two not related?
Port's a way of getting a socket. They are related. When you connect to a port, you are connecting to a socket. What's 50? Well, before we get into the port, one thing that stands out to me is sequelize connection refused error. What do we use sequelize for? Sequelize is a ORM. It's a wrapper. Well, let me back up. What's an ORM? Did Max talk to you about sequelize? Did you guys cover sequelize in class? What do we use sequelize for? It's an object relational mapper. What do we use sequelize for? What are you using sequelize for in your capstone? We're using it for the database. It allows us to connect the backend. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, don't we like use like SQLize for like just like for like the back end, so we could like create like tables and stuff, so we could utilize them to the front end, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it lets us come up with these nice objects in JavaScript that map to tables. So instead of writing a bunch of SQL statements, we just interact with these objects. Like just as a quick refresher, let's go look at the let's go look at the blog backend code really quick. Inside the DB package, remember we have these these nice models here that let us work with a JavaScript object. So we can create comment models, we can search for comment models, we can insert and delete these things, and we could do all of that from JavaScript instead of having to type out SQL statements. So SQLize lets us do all of this. It's right there in the name too. I mean, we're importing from SQLize. We're using the SQLize library to instantiate a driver to the Postgres database. And so here's the problem. Right now, in the blog code at least, in the blog code, we're making a connection to localhost 5432. Yep, that's exactly it, Joe. We're making a connection to localhost 5432, but we're no longer talking to the Postgres that's on our MacBook. And so we need to come up with a little bit of logic here that will connect to our Postgres on our Macs when we're running our backend code on our Macs. And we need to have code that when it's deployed to Fly, switches and uses the Fly Postgres database. Does that make sense? Is there any questions about that? And this is going to be a common theme throughout this week. We're going to see the same thing on the front end, and we're going to see the same thing here again in the back end. But we need to make our code smarter. We need to make it aware of when we run locally versus when we run on Fly, because we have different things that need to change when we do that. Okay, so in the Fly documentation, there's a special variable called process.env.database URL. And if we go back to the terminal where we created, and I've already closed mine. Nope, I didn't. Here it is. I lied. I did close it. Dang, I don't have it anymore. If we go back to where we created, where we did our initial Fly launch, there's a comment saying something about a connection string. And then there's also another comment about a process env database URL. So in the documentation for Fly, and I can pull this up here, Fly database URL. There's, that's not it. It's one of these. Fly database Postgres. This collection. Here we go. Nope, not that one. Nope, not that one. App connection example. Here we go. So here's a link to the official documentation. Sorry, that's not the right link. It's supposed to be this one. This is the official documentation for Fly and connecting to Postgres. But there's this magic variable that Fly populates for you when you are when your code is running on Fly. This variable is going to hold a string. When you're running on your local Mac, the value of this variable is going to be undefined. So what we need is a small test inside of our code where we connect to the database. We need a small test to set the value of that SQLize connection string depending correctly, depending on what context we're running in. So this is the special variable here, process env.database URL. And the case sensitivity here is important. It needs to be uppercase database URL. But if you're running on Fly, this is going to hold a special value. It's actually the value that you saved earlier in your notes, that big long string, that connection string. That's actually what's going to be inside of this box. But okay, let's go ahead and make that edit in our we don't set this in package.json. If we had other environment variables that we wanted to set, we could do that through the package.json. This is one that Fly provides us with, so we don't have to do anything with it in the package.json. Okay, so pulling up VS Code. So I'm going to write a little bit of pseudocode, and then I'm going to get y'all to help me with turning this into actual code. So we have kind of two modes that we need to consider about. We have the mode where process.env.database URL contains something. And then we have a mode where highlight this a little bit better. Let me go and actually grab my connection string. You don't need to do this on your machine. I'm just doing this as an example. Okay. So to help illustrate this, this is the two things that this variable could look like. In case one, this is what it's going to look like if we are running our code on Fly. The Postgres env database URL is going to contain this sort of string. If we're running on case two, if we're running locally, there's not going to be anything inside of this database URL. It's going to evaluate to undefined. So what can we do to make this code down here smart enough to handle both of these cases? Sounds like a if statement to me. Is anybody else thinking if statement? Is there anything else we might consider using here?
Try catch.
Ooh, that's a good idea, actually. We could try to set it up using localhost. If that fails, we could fall back to.
Wouldn't you want to try to send it to the backend server first? Because I mean, if you can run it on if you're on a computer, it would run on localhost no matter what, right?
Potentially. I mean, so we bundle up our code, we send it to Fly. The first thing we do is check to see if there's something on localhost. I mean, right now our code's breaking, right? Because it can't reach localhost 5432. So the ordering there, though, you bring up a good point. The ordering there would matter, right? You kind of have some behavior where you would attempt to do one thing, and if you were unable to, you'd fall back to something else. So a try catch would work here. I like the if else because it's a bit more deterministic. The try catch sort of like you point out, if you have access to the remote database and you also have one installed locally, what happens? Well, you got to go read the code to find out. But that is a good idea. That's one way that we could do this. If we wrote it as an if else, what would the conditions here look like?
Have it check the value of process database URL.
Okay. So let's start doing that. If database URL equals
probably
undefined.
You probably want to check and see if it's undefined, and then run the local version, and then otherwise run in Fly.
Oops. Process and database URL. Cool. Does this work?
Do you need to take out the old DB definition?
Okay. What else? Well, let's validate it. I'm gonna go to my capstone code. Let's open up a terminal. If I haven't broken anything, I should be able to run this. And it should connected locally. It should print out connected locally, right? Make sure I put in my super important semicolon. All right. So I'm here inside of my capstone backend code. I'm going to run npm start. And I got an error because I haven't done npm install. So let's do that really quick. And then run npm start. DB is not defined in module. DBJS line 53. Ooh, okay. So I'm hitting an issue here. Something to do with DB.
Do you have to return the value of DB because you're defining it in there?
Something to do with DB. DB is declared, but its value is never read. Good catch. Yes, it's because it's scoped within these blocks. So it doesn't live outside of these braces. So how can we fix that? We could just create an empty variable, and then instead of defining it internally, we just overwrite the contents of that DB box based on whichever branch we're taking. So I have some stuff going on with my database because I haven't used Postgres on my Mac in a while. But if we scroll up here, connected locally. So it's running through this path, and then it's executing the code below. All that to say, for your capstone, you need some kind of block that looks like this. You need some kind of code that looks like this in order to connect to your Postgres database when you're running Fly. So with this code added, I'm going to go and run. Let's go back to the console. I'm going to run fly deploy again with these changes for the database. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to the other problem that we're about to encounter. So we saw back here, if we open up the logs, we saw a bunch of errors. One of them was related to connecting on 5432. That's about to disappear, and then we're going to have one more error pop up. Give it a second. Okay, API server online connected to database. And then I hit another error. Relation users does not exist. Does anybody want to venture a guess to what this error is talking about?
You don't have anything. You don't have a database that exists, so there's no table that it can pull from.
That's a really good guess. Something, when you see relation, the intuition to think database table, also the fact that it says SQLized database error, good indication that something with the database is going on here. I guarantee that if you're following along, you just fixed your database URL and you just deployed your code. I guarantee every single capstone that uses SQLize has an error just like this. It's going to have an error just like this. And I'm going to talk trash about Max for a minute because every single time I get to this point, I always have to fix a Max bug in the blog backend. And it's my favorite thing because it's like the only time I get to talk trash about Max. Okay, so when Max is writing his database code, he does this every single time. When Max is writing his database code, one of the things that he does is he likes to write these connect to DB functions where when the app stands up, you do this authentication call, you log into the database. This db.sync, if you have a brand new Postgres backend and it has no tables in it, db.sync is going to create your initial set of tables, right? It's going to create your, if you're using this blog backend code, it's going to create your users table. It's going to create the post table, the comment table, all that sort of stuff. So all of this is fine and dandy. The one thing though that Max forgets to do every time is he forgets to await this connected to DB. This whole function is asynchronous and has a bunch of asynchronous stuff in here that we await for. We await for the DB to sync. We await the DB authentication. We try to create some posts. So we await for all of that. So it's all of this asynchronous stuff that's happening. The most important thing is that we remember to await all of those things to happen, because if we go back to the server, one of the first things that the server does is if it doesn't have a user in it, it creates an initial user. And if we try to create that user before those tables are created, that's where we get this issue. All right, I'm done talking trash about Max. He just makes that bug and I always get a kick out of it. All that to say, if you're running into the same problem when you run your capstone, take a look to see if you have the exact same thing in your database where you're connecting to DB and you're doing all this asynchronous awaiting. If you do any of this, make sure that you await the call to connect DB to DB. If you don't await it, what'll happen is this function will fire and eventually it will get finished. But it's really important that this function finishes before any of the rest of your code executes. So add that await statement and that will fix that bug.
How do we save newly synced code or saved code so that it's lining up with what's in Fly?
Yeah, good question. So you don't need to push. You don't need to commit and push to Git. The only thing that you need to do is run fly deploy. Open up your terminal. I made that change on my code. I added that await statement to get it to sync. I just do fly deploy, not launch. Every time you make a change, you do fly deploy.
Oh, whoops. I did all that work and then realized that I have the wrong endpoint in here.
Wrong endpoint. What do you mean by that?
I
Server
copied
database URL.
Yeah, I have it going to blog instead of my capstone URL.
Nice. Cool. So now if I look at my logs, connected to DB, API server is online. So it's up and running. The last thing, after you have deployed, fixed your database connection, now your app is talking to your database. The last thing is, well, let's hit it. Let's see if we can actually reach this service. So take your link, go ahead and try to visit it. So when I go to visit it, it says waiting for machine to be readable on 0.0.0.0:3000. So we've got one last issue before we have a working backend. Does anybody want to venture a guess to what's going on here?
You wanted to listen not on the local house port that we're working with?
Yep. we've got one last port issue. It's asking us, is our app listening on 0.0.0.3000? When we run locally on our Macs, when we run our backend code, does anybody know what port we're using?
3000.
Is it? Tiffany says 3001. Austin says
Oh,
3001.
yeah, back end is 3001. Our front end's on 3000 though.
So let me show you where it's getting this value from. You have a couple of options for how you want to solve this, and there's no wrong way. When you did fly and launch, it created a file called fly.toml. Think of this a lot like package.json, but for your deploy. There's a lot of things you can configure in here, like what region things come up in, what kind of box you're using. There's a lot of configuration options here. The most important one is this internal port 3000. So you need to line up what your app expects with what Fly wants. And you have, again, you have a couple of ways that you can go about this. So the first and easiest one is change that internal port from 3000 to 3001, and you're done. And I would suggest just doing that. The other option is you can go to where you're spinning up your server. So here, server.listen 3001. You could change this to 3000. You could do that as well. And then just start using 3000 when you develop locally. It's entirely up to you. The one important thing though that we have to do is we need to add a second argument to the server.listen call. And I'm going to paste this into the Zoom chat. Instead of binding to localhost, we need our server to bind to our local network interface. This doesn't change anything when we run locally. We could still access our backend by visiting localhost 3001, but it's really important that we bind to this network interface when we deploy to Fly. Localhost doesn't work. So make sure that you add this second argument to the server.listen. Okay, with those two changes, now if we go back to our terminal and we run fly deploy again, making sure that we're in the root of our folder where the fly.toml is. So a couple of changes we talked about. We've talked about adjusting the port to 3001. We've talked about adding the 0.0.0.0 argument to the server.listen function. We've talked about updating the database URL when we connect using Sequelize. With those three, and then fixing the await bug when we connect to our DB in code. With those four things, we now have enough. With our code, we now have enough to run on Fly. If I refresh this endpoint, now I'm getting that API online, and I can do things like /posts, and I get blog posts. Okay. We covered a bunch of stuff. We did some pointing and clicking. I talked a lot about, I talked briefly about some code changes that we need to make in order to get our backend code working. We installed Fly. We talked a little bit about application hosting. We talked a little bit about scaling. We talked a little bit about memory constraints and some other stuff that I'm probably missing. We talked a little bit about Git, and we got our Git front end and back end capstones at least initialized. Dev versus prod, that's essentially localhost versus deployed in our paradigm right now. We have our dev environment, which is our Macs, and then we have prod, which is our, is that what you're talking about, Joe?
I meant more for the backend endpoint that Fly's using. It automatically gave like fly.dev.
Oh, I see. We're going to treat Fly as our prod environment, even though it's a .dev, or so we're going to treat it like it's prod. All that to say, we did a bunch of stuff. The gist of what I want from you tonight is pretty simple. I want GitHub Capstone. I want those repos created. I want you to start using those repos to do your capstone development. I know we're in the last couple of weeks of the capstone, but I really want you to shift over to using those capstones, those GitHub capstone repos. That's first and foremost probably the most important thing. Start using those repos for your development on your capstone. Okay. You should have Fly installed, the Fly CLI installed. You should feel comfortable doing a Fly deploy. That's it. That's all I need you to take away from tonight. If you didn't get the bugs worked out, if you didn't get the ports adjusted, if you didn't connect to the database, no big deal. We'll figure that all out. We'll fix all of that. In fact, if you didn't get Fly installed, we'll figure that all out. We'll fix that. But if you got to the point where you were able to just do a deploy, you're in great shape. If you want to take some time before now and Wednesday, because we don't meet tomorrow, if you want to take some time between now and Wednesday and try to fix those bugs, go back and watch some of the video and see if you can get your backend standing up. You will be in great shape if come Wednesday, you can do what I did and be able to visit your backend in a web browser URL. Maybe it doesn't have all your data that you have locally on your Postgres, because we spun up a brand new Postgres. Maybe it doesn't have all of that in there. That's fine. We'll fix all of that stuff. On Wednesday, we're going to talk about deploying our front end. And then on Thursday, I'm going to go, same thing as last time that we meet. I'm going to go one by one through everybody's capstone. And everybody's going to walk away from this class with a working front end and back end that's deployed. That's it. Thank you guys so much. Really glad to see all of you again. Really looking forward to seeing you all on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your evening, and yeah, have fun at OpenHack. Questions? Is the expected output that I should be able to see within my Oh, feel free to drop off. Don't need to stick around. I'm just going to answer this question. Is the expected output that I should be able to see what's in my rest end when I click that backend link? Yes. The code that you just pasted, the /, that's the root. So if you don't visit anything in the URL, it's just the root. Yeah, you would expect to see server running. Is that showing up? It's showing up? Heck yeah, nice. Yeah, I'm going to use the link sheet as attendance for tonight. I don't have a cutesy GitHub exercise. I mean, technically, you made 2 repos, so like, as good as it gets. Other questions? Cool. See ya. Have a good rest of your evening.